Look, I'm willing to admit it. I need some help. Hello, everyone. I'm Chef Tom, and welcome to Episode 8, Part 2 of the 65816 ATX project, or Project Neon Sunrise. I've titled this episode, I Need Some Help, and we'll get to that by the end of the episode. Our main goal for today is to design the PCB from the schematics that we made last time, which what you're going to see is going to be my third run through trying to make it, as the first two times I just could not fit everything on the board, and then I couldn't fit all the logic lines on the board, and I had to make some concessions. I wanted to keep this to a 2-layer board. I wanted to stay in Flex ATX. I did not get to do either of those things. As you'll see, we'll already be into the micro ATX form factor, and I'll still be running a 4-layer board, using 3 of those layers for running data and whatnot, and using one of the internal layers as a ground plane and using the extra fill space of the other as the 5-volt plane. Going to try and stick to top and bottom layers as much as possible, using only the 3rd layer as necessary when it's just not possible to, or possible but not feasible or reasonable to run lines any other way. And I'm going to try and keep nothing on the 2nd layer so that can just be the copper ground plane and try and offer some signal isolation. Why ATX? Well, mostly to make it accessible to everyone. My original goal was to, if possible, get to a mini ITX footprint, which would allow it to fit in the most cases, and if you wanted to just build it on your workbench and not put it in a case, it doesn't matter what size it is. If you wanted to put it into a case, great. And then I want to have the option to put it into a wedge case, like this Commodore 128 over here. I'd love to build a wedge type scenario that can work in. So I figured ATX is a great platform. It's everywhere, and even if we use an ATX power supply, then you can mount your power supply in your case and have it still work. Or you can just go to a Pico ITX power supply, which plugs in the same way and will still work just fine, which also gives us our +5, -5, and +12 rails. Flex ATX was an option I wanted to look at because that 128 case right there is super deep. There's nothing wrong with it. I like it personally. I like the design of it, but I didn't want to have to make a case that was that deep if I didn't have to. And a micro ATX case is 9.6 inches squared, so I would need a really deep case. That's where we're going to be right now, and it may be where we end up, but that's fine. It gives us more options, and we'll see how everything turns out. Let's get started on building this PCB. The first thing we need to do is transfer our schematic parts over to the PCB. From here, I'll begin organizing all of the parts into groupings that make logical sense for how the schematic is laid out. We're trying to keep all the power, reset, and glue logic circuitry to the right, and the card slots to the left. I've opted not to put the VIA that controls the LCD screen underneath it, because these are going to end up on a daughter board later. I needed to adjust the sizing on the board for some of the capacitors. And here I'm adding header pins for the unused glue logic gates, though they are still being tied to ground through a resistor. Now I've got everything approximately where I want it, but that is not going to fit on a Flex ATX motherboard like that. I've gone ahead and copied the ATX footprints that I have from another PCB schematic. Now it's just a matter of getting everything to fit in here. I'm starting with the edge cuts, including the holes for the screws at the mounting points. I've marked off the area for the I/O backplane so that I know not to put any chips there and only to put inputs and outputs there. I've decided to put in headers for 2 expansion slots, as well as pin headers for the data, address, and control lines, though that won't make it into the final product. Here I'm setting up the second via and its diagnostic lights, and the serial communications. A lot of these pieces are going to move a lot before we get to a final setup. And this gives us, for the moment, pretty much the layout of our board. I'm just going to blow through the wiring side of this, since it all has to be redone anyway. You can just enjoy the time lapse. Considering I'm not an engineer, and I have absolutely no experience in this other than what you guys have seen on this channel, I think I did a pretty good job. So, some mistakes were made. I did not go back through after I migrated to KiCad 6 and make sure that all of my settings were in line with my PCB production company's standards. So it got kicked back for basic prototyping. They did say, oh, well, we can make this under the advanced PCBs, but the price will be like 3 times as much. And I was like, I'm not paying that much. I'll go back and redesign it so I use it right. So I went in and I changed the settings, but now I basically have to start from scratch because everything was wrong. But I'm going to do that off camera. I'll get that nailed down and it'll be fine. It will be fine. Why do I need help? Or more accurately, where do I need help? I am not a software guy. You guys have seen I have worked really hard on all this hardware. Software blows my mind. I can do some really rudimentary stuff, but I'm struggling a lot with it. I would love to have some help on the software side, if at all possible. That would be amazing. I would love to have some help on the software side. I'm going to need some help with design, mostly the case design, but also with writing the manuals and things like that when we get that far. I want to have a very comprehensive manual with all the diagrams and all the explanations and example code and screenshots. And I know how to do a lot of the stuff, publishing stuff, but I'm not a graphic designer, so I'm going to need some help refining it. I need feature feedback. I've got ideas, things I want to work into this computer, things I want to avoid in this computer. I want to have a conversation with people about what do they want to see, what do they not want to see, what do I want to put in that's way over the top and unnecessary. I'm open to suggestions, and I'm open to feedback and collaboration, and although I'll have everything up on GitHub and you can make your pull requests and do whatever, I'd love to see the feedback and see what people are doing. I'd love to make this a real community computer going forward. And most importantly, I'm going to need testers when we get to that point, and I'd like to give people who have been helping out all along first access to testing. So when we get there, when we get some prototypes made up, I want to have people who are already on board, who are familiar with it, to help with testing rather than just starting to call people out of the blue and say, hey, will you test this for me? Hey, will you look at this for me? So I would love to start building a little bit of a community around this. So next steps for this week are I'm actually going to be traveling for the next 2 weeks for work, my day job. So reworking the main board in KiCad. I have KiCad on my laptop, but I don't know how much time I'm going to have to actually work on that while I'm on the road. I want to add more prototyping connections. You saw some of the design ideas. The unused pins on the logic chips have just headers that I can plug DuPont wires into, and then we can jump that off to a breadboard or to another chip or whatever. I want to rework the next version with more of those. Maybe have a couple of just generic glue logic chip spots. One for a gal, one for 2 or 3 just generic glue logics that we can put sockets in. If we need to add those chips, we can add those chips. And micro ATX is fine for now, but once we get this really going, I want to get it back down to flex ATX. I think part of that we can solve because we're going to take the LCD off of this board and it's going to have its own spot. And that's going to make a huge difference. Being able to move the LCD and some other components to a daughter board will drastically change that, because I think the real-time clock, the LCD, and some other stuff are going to live on a daughter board that, in the idea of an ATX case, will fit into a 5 1/4 inch drive bay, or in the wedge, we'll actually have a dedicated spot for the LCD in the wedge as kind of a status panel. And then I'm going to start working on the wedge case design. I am not a great designer. I will make the most utilitarian design I can imagine. I mean, I needed these shelves over my head here. I went out in my shop and I built them. They are literally just a trapezoid with 2 sets of shelves on it that bolts to the wall. Highly efficient, highly functional. Love having it up there. Kind of wish I didn't paint it black now that it's up on the wall, but that's fine. But I'm going to need help with that design, making it really, really cool. Once I start doing that design in Fusion 360, I'll put those files up. But that's all I've got for this week. If you're interested in helping out with this project at all, or you just have some ideas, make sure to leave a comment. You can send me a message or an email, however it is you want to get a hold of me. I really would like to make this a total community project by the time we really get this rolling. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, go ahead and press that subscribe button in the center of the screen. I've also got a couple other videos I think you might enjoy.